Hey, welcome back to 7 Steps to Smile. Today we're going to be talking about the identity loop. It's the cycle where identity feeds behavior, you find proof, and that strengthens the identity. It explains why habits stick, why change is hard, and why some people stay stuck in versions of themselves that they no longer want to be. By the end of this episode, you'll know how to break negative identity loops and how to build empowering ones. Have you ever noticed how one small behavior can suddenly become who you are? Like, you go to the gym once and the next day you're Googling protein powders, or you're searching for workout routines. Or maybe you skip the gym once and suddenly you're not really a gym person anymore. That's not a coincidence, that's identity. And identity is probably the most powerful feedback loop in human psychology. It explains how tiny actions, consistent tiny actions, reinforce identity, which in turn reinforces our future actions and our future reality. This matters because we think that our actions shape results, and they do, but we hardly ever think about what shapes our actions, what drive our actions. A lot of people think that it's motivation, think that you need to maintain motivation, but that's not really possible. Motivation shapes your short-term actions, sure, but motivation fades. And without updating your identity, behavior change feels like swimming upstream, like fighting a losing battle, because you're trying something that's difficult because it's different. And you're fighting yourself and your own set of beliefs about yourself. If your identity says, I'm disorganized, at every attempt at productivity, this attempt sits on top of a contradiction. What that means is, if you believe that you're disorganized, if that's the story that you keep telling yourself, every time you try to get neater, or you try to get more productive, or you try to get more organized, then you're starting off believing that this is against who you are, and that whatever changes you make will be in the short term. This episode provides this missing link, the missing layer behind all the personal change that we really want to do, that we really want in our lives. So what is an identity loop? What's the explanation, the theory behind it? An identity loop is this repeating psychological cycle. It's made up of 4 components. The first is identity. A lot of people believe that your identity is who you are. And I understand why people think that way. I thought that way as well, until I learned that it's not. Your identity isn't who you are. Your identity is a set of beliefs. It's the story that you believe about who you are. And that's the key difference. It's not who you are actually, because you're a different person to different people, different perspectives. I like to think of us like onions. There's layers to us. The second part of the cycle is behavior. So the identity is the story. Your behavior is the actions that flow from the story, the coherent narrative that makes sense because of the story that you keep telling yourself. 3 is the evidence. It's the outcomes that come out of the actions, out of the behaviors that reinforce the narrative, that reinforce the story. And this loop strengthens the identity. So it feeds back into the first component. It feeds back into your identity. And that makes the story harder to change and harder to challenge, because you start believing it more. It makes the actions easier because this is who you are. So this is what you're going to do. And this is what you're going to get. So why is this loop so powerful? We like to think that our brains are working for us all the time, and they are. Your brain is working for you all the time, but your brain wants you to be safe. And for a lot of the things that we want to do, for us to get better, there's an element of risk. Not necessarily risk in the sense that everything might go wrong, but risk in the sense that for us to do something new, we don't know what's going to happen, because we've never done it before, and that's risky, right? Your brain would rather be consistent than right. It would rather keep doing what it's been doing and stay in the familiar than take a risk and do something that you haven't done before. these predictions that your brain has to go through to try and figure out what might be requires energy. But identity is an energy saver. We want to be smart about our energy. Unconsciously, subconsciously, that's what we're doing. Once your mind labels you as I'm shy, I'm not sporty, or I'm bad with money, it filters all your decisions and all your reality around that label. The identity loops that we carry weren't chosen by us, at least not initially, not until you listen to this episode. They were inherited. Maybe your family just weren't academic. Maybe you come from a sporty, athletic family, and that's the story that you told yourself, that it's genetic for you. And maybe it is, but when you grow up in that environment, and when you keep consistently telling yourself that you're not academic and you're more sporty, that becomes what you believe, and that shapes your decisions. It could also be based on bad moments or one bad moment. Maybe you failed a math test once. Maybe it was your first math test, and you decided that you're bad at math. And that's the story that you told yourself. And that's what you carried throughout your school, throughout your life, that you're bad at math. So that shapes your decisions. You always tend to stay away from the numbers. And that shapes your career, it shapes what you do, it even shapes your social interactions. And speaking about social interactions, identities can also be absorbed socially. If everybody tells you that you're the funny one, right, that you're the jokester, that sort of becomes who you are. That's your role that you take on. Because everybody must be saying it, that's the story that you absorb into your identity. So they're not chosen initially. And our role right now is to figure out what are these identities that we didn't choose, that we live with, the stories that we tell ourselves about who we are. What are they? A student who believes, I'm not somebody who gets A's, I'm not somebody who gets distinctions. They study well for a test, but then they panic because they believe that they're just not the type of person that does well. And because of that, they underperform. Because they underperform and they get a bad grade, it reinforces the story that they tell themselves, that they're not somebody who does well. And in the next test, they expect failure. Maybe they study a little bit less. Maybe while they're studying, they just accept the fact that they're not going to do well. And that affects the quality of their preparation, that affects the quality of their actions, and it repeats the same result. This creates a sort of self-fulfilling identity cycle. And that's the exact example that I'm trying to get at here. Maybe a friend who starts running just to try it completed 1 2-kilometer run, 1 5-kilometer run maybe. And at that point, when somebody sees that they've accomplished this, maybe they posted it on Instagram or on their status or something, they might tell someone, they might tell a friend, oh, I think I'm a runner now. And from that point on, they start improving rapidly because the identity that they created comes before a behavior, and this behavior keeps strengthening the identity. So now we understand what identity loops are. We understand how they can affect our lives, and we have concrete examples on how they work. So what do we do? How do we take conscious, intentional steps to transform our identities and to transform our lives and get the results and the realities that we want? How do we change who we are for the better? Step 1 is to identify your current identity loop. So I spoke about this just now, but how do we do this? It's a lot more difficult than we'd imagine. And the first thing that you have to do is ask, what identity do I believe without questioning? What's the story that I tell myself without questioning, without giving it a second thought? And what behavior keeps proving it true? Some common identity loops are, I'm not disciplined, I procrastinate, I'm socially awkward, I'm unlucky in relationships, or I'm not good at relationships, or I'm not smart enough. A heavy one that a lot of people carry is, I'm not good enough. That's something that I I'm dealing with, well, yeah, I actually am still dealing with it. Step 2 is to intercept the loop with micro evidence, with small changes. The identity change doesn't start with a belief, it starts with evidence. You have to prove to yourself that this old story just isn't true. It's not the reality. It's not what's happening. It's just what you tell yourself, and you find what you're looking for because you're looking for it. For example, if you study for 5 minutes, you push through that initial bit of resistance that you feel, and you just sit down and you start, you could prove to yourself that if I study for 5 minutes, I could study for 10 minutes. If I study for 10 minutes, I could do 15, 20, or half an hour. And you start proving to yourself that you can be consistent. If you send one message and you keep up with one person in your life, you can prove, I can be social. I can connect and I can engage in the relationships in my life. If you go for one walk, you prove I can take care of my health. These examples and this evidence that you create starts creating these tiny cracks in the old story. And it becomes a lot easier to change these beliefs that you just don't want. Step 3 is to use identity statements deliberately. Shift from I want to do something, but don't start it like that. Say, I want to become the kind of person who does this. And use identity first phrasing. So instead of I want to go to the gym, say I'm becoming the person who values their health. I'm becoming the person who is fitter. Instead of saying I want to read more books, say I'm learning to be a reader. I'm learning to enjoy reading. Instead of saying I want to spend more time with my family, say I'm becoming the kind of person who puts their family first more often. I'm becoming the kind of person who takes the time to invest in the relationships that matter to me. Step 4 is to reinforce this loop with tracking. Because if we're being honest, we are not unbiased about who we are, about ourselves, right? Every repetition reinforces the identity. So track your wins and strengthen that loop. Once you see your progress written down or ticked off on a piece of paper consistently, maybe not every single day, but check-ins, weekly check-ins help. Once you see that progress physically, you can touch it, it's in front of you. It reinforces the idea that you are becoming a new person. So that's the framework. Identify your current identity loops, intercept the loops with micro changes, start creating those cracks in the old story. Use identity statements. I want to become the kind of person who does this. I'm becoming the kind of person. I'm learning to be the type of person. I'm practicing this identity. And step 4, reinforce the loop. Track it. We have the framework. So now what do? Here's the time for experimentation. Here's the time to do something new, to shake it up a bit. The first experiment that I want you to try is the 2-minute identity test. Pick one identity you want, something that you want to incorporate in your life, and just do a behavior that takes under 2 minutes to prove it today. Pretend, even if you don't believe it. If your identity is, I'm organized, organize one folder, organize one thing, organize one part of your room or your environment. Just do it for 2 minutes. Do it today. If the identity that you want is, I'm healthy, just go and drink a glass of water right now. Go pause this episode and go and drink a glass of water right now. And that will start reinforcing this little idea in your mind, the seed that's been planted, that I am healthy. Experiment 2 is rewrite one of the identities that you don't want, one of the limiting identities. Pick one identity that you believe is holding you back right now. Maybe it's I'm not confident. And rewrite it. Rewrite it as, it's not that I'm not confident, It's that I am practicing the identity of somebody who speaks up. I'm practicing the identity of somebody who believes in themselves, somebody who takes a chance on themselves. I'm practicing the identity of somebody who trusts themselves, and then act on this. Act on it once a day, once a week, but be consistent about it and track it. A third experiment is a simple one. Say your new identity out loud, or to somebody else. Bringing somebody else in actually helps keep us more accountable. You could even just do it in writing, but the act of declaring this new identity makes it real, and it helps us put a little bit of tension on making sure that we keep up with the changes that we're trying to make. As you reflect on what we've spoken about today, I want you to ask yourself just a few questions. 1. Which part of my identity did I never consciously choose? 2. Which identity loop has been running my life lately without me knowing it? 3. What tiny action can I take today to give myself some new evidence? Some evidence that maybe what I believe about myself is not true, and what I want to believe about myself is. And 4. If I wasn't attached to my current identity, what would I try? What would I want to do? What would I want to be? Identity isn't fixed. It's a story reinforced by behavior, and stories can be rewritten. The small choices that you make today aren't just habits. They're votes for the person that you're becoming. Choose one identity you want to move forward towards this week and prove it with one tiny action today. Thank you, and I'll see you next week.